Hello ladies and gentlemen, and Idiot Imports is sponsored by PlayAsia, who most likely supplied this game to me unless I specifically mentioned that they didn't. You can follow the affiliate link in the description to buy this game from PlayAsia to support me and my channel, and you can use the coupon code BLUEVITA to save $3 off your order. Thanks for your support, enjoy the show. Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Blue Maxima, and I'm here checking out Daisenryaku Exceed 2. Strangely enough, this is the sequel to the last game of the Daisenryaku franchise that actually came out over here. It's the sequel to Daisenryaku 7, Modern Military Tactics Exceed, which is a little strange, but, well, here we go. You'd think they'd try and bring this one over, but no, apparently not. Since the original on Xbox and PS2 was localized by two completely different and extremely tiny independent companies, so yeah, it's kind of weird, but nevertheless, here we are. I'm going to be doing this one a little bit differently because, well, as we both know, I suck at strategy games, and the game in question here is actually, it's quite slow, which is a good or a bad thing depending on how you look at things. But yeah, I do have a plan to get around this and get as much footage into the video as possible, but we'll just have to go and have a look around first, like we usually do. It's a shame that the main menu music is so cool because the in-game battle music, which is one, 2-minute loop, is absolute garbage, and I'm amazed. I'm absolutely amazed. But anyway, this is the setup, or the options menu, as we all call it. I gotta reset the options to default, because there's something I need to do first, but, well, there's something I need to demonstrate first. But we'll go I'll show you well, I can't show you what all the options do, but I can tell you what they all do. All of these options here are UI and interface sort of things. They're not the most impressive thing in the world. This is your music, sound effects, and testing the music. This here is, I'll be damned if I actually remember what this does. Square, you can also map the square button to whatever you want, but I don't know what most of these are because they won't translate properly. As usual with this series, I try and translate stuff using my tablet, and you can invert the screen colors in order to try and get these things to translate, but even then, the camera has a lot of trouble picking all them up, so good luck trying to figure all them out by yourself, I'll tell you that much. And you can also pick a different soldier as not so much an advisor, but more like an announcer, which is a little odd, but it's kind of pointless, so I haven't really bothered to change it. So we'll go back out to the main menu here. Now we can go to the metal store. The metal store is honestly a strange thing. You only get access to these 5 units. They're slightly improved units from the base game, which is even weirder, honestly. And you spend these medals. You get these medals by successfully finishing missions and campaign missions and free play missions. But you can spend these medals in order to get a saved unit, at which point you can just import these into a campaign mission or a free play mission. But they're not very good anyway. You would expect the metal store to give you more things than just 5 different units, which are slightly better than ones in the main game, but oh well. There is a full-on tutorial. Then again, it's not really that full-on, actually. You'll get the basics from this, but it doesn't teach you that much about the absolute inner mechanics about how the game works, unfortunately. I'll do my best, but there's not that much I can actually do about that. There's a map editor, which is actually kind of nice. This was this in the previous game? Pretty sure this was in the previous game too, which was the World War II one, the Rise and Fall of Greater East Asia. But yeah, there's a map editor. You can save up to 6 different maps, and you can make maps using pretty much all the terrain blocks and all the tricks that you would come to expect from this sort of map editor. So I can just make a full bunch of mountains right here. Or I can make a fill bucket of water. Or I can, there's a copy and paste option. There's enough things that work perfectly fine as is, right? So, also, if we hit the start button, you can do a few things, like you can change the map settings, which we won't bother going into until we get to the free play modes. You can view the maps in 3D, but this is, trust me, this is a lot more impressive when you've actually got a fully fleshed out map. You can turn off the grid for some reason, and there's also save and load, and then there's down at the bottom, there's the exit option, so we'll just exit right out. Now, there are 3 types of missions that you've got in this game. You've got the mission, the campaign, and the free play. The mission is a series of standalone missions. You go through them one by one. You don't carry anything over from one to the next. And you just try and beat whatever the mission objective is. The majority of the time, it's defeat the enemy units or go into the enemy headquarters and capture it, but not always. It's not always like that. There are sometimes missions where you have to chase down a particular enemy unit, for example. The campaign is sort of similar. You get 5 different campaigns, and they can spread out depending on whether or not you lose a mission. So there's like branching paths, and you can carry forth units between missions. And the way units work in this game, like in I think the previous game worked like this too. I'm trying to remember, but my mind's coming up blank. But you can actually carry over units that have leveled up. Depending on how much combat they get into and if they survive it, they'll level up from levels E through S, D, C, B, A, S. And you can carry them over and they'll have better stats every time you manage to level them up. So it's actually kind of interesting, but it's not like the campaign in Daisenryaku, The Rise and Fall of Greater East Asia, or the World War II one, as I named it, because there's no research or anything like that to be done. You have access to every single unit your faction has at the very beginning of the game, which is actually pretty nice. So, well, actually, no, that's kind of a lie. When you go through the missions, you actually unlock new units for the particular factions as well, which is pretty good. And also, you can carry campaign soldiers that you've leveled up over to free play as well, which is where we'll be going for this. I'm going to go on a new game first, but I'll be backing out and loading into a game I just made. And I've got a reason for that, trust me. So, you can come in here to do a few things. You've got lots of different scenarios that you can come play. Lots of different scenarios. We're talking like 50 or 60 here, and every time you complete a campaign mission or a mission, you unlock that stage for use in free play, and there'll be like free play options for it as well. So, very useful indeed. If you select no on that thing, if you select yes on that mission, on that dialogue box, it'll take you straight to the mission. But if you select no, you can come here and edit shit. So, how much can we edit here? You can edit whether or not there's a player who's an AI or there's a free slot. You can change the faction of the character in that slot, and there's an absolute ton of factions. We've got North Korea, we've got South Korea, China, Iran. This is Iraq, isn't it? Might be. I know this sounds bad. I don't know my country's flags that well. We've got that looks like Soviets. Denmark, Finland, one or the other. Italy, Germany, France, Great Britain, Russia, the United States, and Japan, obviously, considering this is the Japanese war game. You can change the amount of funds and the amount of money, not the amount of money, the amount of funds and the amount of fuel everyone has at the start of the game. And you can also change the allies, so you can change who's working with who. So you have a lot of options as to how the battles are going to go down. I just gotta remember which one of these options is, oh, apparently I can't get out of this, so I'll just have to, can I get out of this? Yes, okay. So, yeah, you have a lot of options about your fights and the ways they go down. The unfortunate thing I've noticed about not only this, but the previous game and the next 2 games I'm gonna be looking at, is that they've all got no multiplayer. Which is kind of disappointing, actually, now that I think about it. considering that this game would actually be really good, considering that the factions are fairly well balanced, more or less, it just seems disappointing to me that for some reason they've decided just not to have multiplayer, even if it was like pass and play multiplayer, because that would work pretty well, but unfortunately they decided not to do that. So yeah, that's a little bit disappointing, honestly. Wait, what's this? Ah, the players in the 4th slot. But yeah, every map also has 3 pages of commentary and 3 pages of advice, which is kind of funny, actually. And you can also check the results of any battles you've played, and I believe I've successfully finished one scenario. Yeah, this one here, and I had a lot done. So, yeah, but anyway, I'm going to go back, I'm going to load into a game, and then I'm going to come back, I'm going to load into a new scenario, and I'm going to let... Well, we'll get to how this works when I get to it. You have plenty of save data slots for your different in-game battles, which is nice. But let's just hop into Okinawa War, slot 6. Hear that music in the background? That's gonna keep going forever. Yeah, that's pretty bad, but what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna take the opportunity to explain just, well, as much of this game, how this game works, as I can. So, the game is, it's very comparable to Advance Wars, if you ever played that. This game actually came first, so if you think that this is a rip-off of Advance Wars, don't. This game came out like 3 years before the original Famicom Wars did, so it actually came first, and I'm willing to believe that Famicom Wars and, by extension, Advance Wars and games like that actually took a ton of inspiration from Daisenryaku, which is actually pretty neat when you think about it. But anyway, let's go over how this game works. So, you've got your main base here. You can see the flag there, which is the Blue 4 flag. And when you select this area or an area within 5 squares of it, that's a city, or you select an area that's just like right next to it. It really depends on what's there on the terrain or stuff like that. You can build units. So if I just move this tank out of the way, and we'll get on to how units move shortly. This is mainly just a tutorial for people who like to play Daisenryaku. I'm gonna go over more complex stuff when I get around to playing the second match. But nevertheless, you can come to your HQ to build a unit. And as I said before, it's not like the Rise and Fall of Greater East Asia. You have all your units by default. So we can come through here and have a look at everything. We've got everything from ATVs to troop transport vehicles to MLRS to artillery guns to anti-aircraft guns to resupply trucks to, well, pretty much everything. And the way the default sort works for every faction is that all the same sort of units tend to be grouped together. So once you've played a faction for long enough to know where all of its units are roughly, it'll actually match that across all factions. So once you know what one faction can do, playing another faction is actually pretty simple. If we press square on one of these, we can actually check out his stats. This is a lot different compared to Daisenryaku, the Rise and Fall of Greater East Asia, where everything is actually really easily sorted out, which is kind of nice, because everything's in the same place that it is all the time, as it is on every other unit. So you can just look through this stat screen and see what's going on, but I'll take you through this one by one anyway. Up in the top left, you've got the unit name, the unit type, and the unit faction, obviously. In the top right, the first thing down is the unit type. This is very useful. Like, pay attention to what that unit symbol is, because you can actually see it here on this screen as well. If you go to a unit that can actually carry along that sort of unit, see how the third from the top right down has that same symbol. That means it's a transport unit, and it can carry along that similar unit. So that's the unit symbol right there. The second one down is the unit abilities. So there are a bunch of things that units can do. Like, there's the ability to intercept, there's the ability to delay interception, there's the ability to jam people, there's the ability to take over buildings. It's all here, and there's a bunch of different abilities that can go here, and I've only translated a handful of them via the game's manual. So it's probably better just to figure out what units can do what, just by playing around with them like on a free play map or something. Because there are a lot of different kinds of abilities. This unit can capture units before moving, after moving, and I don't even know what that first one is, but it's probably something interesting. In the middle, we've got the detection and evasion hexes. Now, the detection hexes are what determine the game's fog of war. So if I back out here, I'll be coming back to that menu shortly. You can see how I'm missing a bunch of the map here. I'm missing a bunch of intel. That's because these units here have a maximum view range of 3 here, down to the ground, right? And there's more, there's not even that many more. You can see the individual view ranges of every unit by going into this little segment here, which is actually quite nice. But as you can see, my maximum view range is actually out to there. And this game does have Fog of War, and it does have, as you can see, it does have different height variations, so you can see when things are coming in from the air and stuff like that. I mean, of course, this thing should be able to see things coming in from the air because it's an anti-aircraft gun, so you would expect it to be able to. But yeah, this game's got Fog of War, and it's also got this intercept ability, which is quite interesting. I can't show it to you here, but I might be able to show it to you in the second fight, where if a unit, for example, moves into the Fog of War too far and actually runs into an enemy unit, the enemy unit gets the opportunity to counterattack and the other unit can't fight back. That's actually a really interesting idea, and it makes things dangerous, because if you just send your weakest units into enemy territory willy-nilly, they are likely to get screwed. They are likely to get destroyed by an enemy who might be lying there in wait. It's very interesting. It makes you move up very slowly and very tactfully. I don't know what the word tactically would be if you wanted to do it that way. Nevertheless. So, if I just make my way back here, we have... Can I move these jets? Yes, I can. I'm going to move those jets eventually. So, whoops. The camera actually moves the middle... The game moves the middle hex depending on where the camera is, which is useful from time to time, but sometimes it'll move without you expecting it to because your camera's too far off center. So, that can happen. Also of note, if you come here, this is where you come to actually put in troops you saved from previous conflicts. So, as you can see, I've saved an absolute fucking ton of main battle tanks, which can actually be pretty useful on a land-based map because you don't need to spend the money or the resources to bring them up. Which is, well, actually, do you have to spend all the money and resources to bring them up? That's a good question. Allow me... Actually, yeah, I imagine you do, because they're actually more expensive, and so they must be higher level. Let's find out. Yeah, it takes more money to bring them out because they're higher level. Okay. That makes some sort of sense. I imagine the game would be overpowered if you can just spam units, but yeah. So there's a ton of different kinds of units. Like, let's just go have a look around at the ones I've got out right now. Like, these are main battle tanks. And I didn't finish showing off the information screen. So you've got the normal hex, and then you've got the evasion hex, which means how often they are to avoid. You've also got what I believe to be a sight table in the bottom right, where it'll tell you how far you can... No, I don't think that's the sight table. It's the movement table, how far you can move through specific things. And you've also got your typical unit stats on the bottom left, like durability, fuel, move radius, and stuff like that. You've also got HP. Now, this is the weapons screen. Got a couple of good weapons here to demonstrate this with, actually. So, you've got your ammo count as the second column. The first column is obviously the name of the weapon. And in the columns to the right there, you've got the weapon accuracies. Now, the weapon accuracies aren't like a one and done thing. Depending on whether or not your opponent is like in the air, or they're on a mountain, or they're trying to hide from you in their own city or something like that, this will change. But that's just a rough overlook of what can hit what. And these 7 columns here represent units different altitudes. So the very first one there is high altitude, then it goes medium altitude, then ground level, then no, does it go like that? No, I think it goes high, medium, low, then ground, then it's hard to remember, honestly, because there's an absolute ton of different kinds of altitudes in this game. But no, wait, I think I remember now. So it's high, low, ground, sea level. Damn it! No, I don't remember. But yeah, as you can see, if I come to this one here again, you can see how there's 6 different levels, and it basically complies to them. So, yeah, it's pretty complicated, I gotta say. But yeah, this guy, since he's a main battle tank, he's obviously very good at fighting stuff on his own level, which is kind of nice. You can also come here. This is the weapons range table. So, the second column is the firepower, which is a little bit weird to be on the weapons range table, but it's there anyway. And again, firepower doesn't really matter that much depending on the unit you're fighting, but then again, this unit is very good at pretty much anything that's on the ground, so that's a good thing to have. You've also got in the columns, you've got the different firepowers for the different altitudes, and wait. No, this isn't the different altitudes, is it? God damn it, I'm trying to remember. But I think, yeah, this is unit types, actually, now that I think about it. But yeah. Yeah, that's different unit types, because I'm an idiot. So you've got things like planes and jets, helicopters, soldiers, actual ground units like vehicles and soldiers. Yeah, I did not mean to exit that. Yeah, if we come back here, these are all your ranges, and that final column is how far down or up you can fire your gun. Yeah, there you go. And this tells you what you can do with your current weapon. Now, I can't remember these off the top of my head, but the first 4 columns are like attack, movement attack, counter attack. I can't remember what the 4th one is. I can't remember what the 5th one is either. This is actually translatable, so, you know, if you invert your colors on your Vita, you'll be able to figure this out when you need to. And the 6th and 7th columns are missile and mega hex. And mega hex does damage to both the hex you target and all hexes around it. Most weapons don't do that. They're mainly one-on-one sorts of things. So yeah, that's a quick look. Like, I know this is complicated, and I've been playing this game for like 10 hours now, and I'm still having trouble figuring this shit out, because, yeah, I'm not very good at these sorts of games, and I have to be constantly whipping out the tablet to get translations for this sort of thing. But it is figure-outable. You can do it. It's possible. I've done it, and I'm an idiot. This is why this is called an idiot imports. Of course, there are also ways to make things like ships and planes. Like, for example, I will move my F2 out of the way, for example. The F2 can actually go to multiple different heights. Different heights actually cost different amounts of fuel to move to. And you can also attack different people at different heights. So if I just move him up here, he can't be hit by most things at the moment, which is kind of nice. And he's also got, if I can just get the camera centered right, this is one of my problems with the game, where if you have the camera at an odd angle, you usually can't select the right hex without really trying hard. So yeah, as we can see here, the F2 has an absolute ton of different weapons, but unfortunately I only have the pack on this one that only allows it to attack enemies in the air, which is actually quite neat, but still kind of annoying. So we can actually make planes as well. So if I come here and have a look at the planes that we have available, there's a bunch of different planes. You've got things like attack helicopters like the AH-64s and the ones. You've got Chinooks down the bottom. You've got C-130 transports. You've got planes. You've got bombers. You've got fighter jets. You've got all sorts of shit. And every unit, well, not every unit, but a lot of different units have packs of weapons. And these actually change what weapons they carry along with them into the fight. And you can resupply them as well, which is quite neat. Same thing also applies to boats. Boats, you've got everything from destroyers to aircraft carriers to submarines. And the submarines are interesting. I think Germany actually has nuclear subs, which is actually really cool. Because being able to do attacks from being submerged underwater is actually pretty neat. But anyway, you do have a movement hex system, as I told you about earlier. I'm just trying to demonstrate everything I'm not going to be able to demonstrate mid-fight. So you've got a movement hex system, and moving costs fuel, and it also costs fuel to make units. So there are a few different types of buildings that you can capture for your peoples. You've got regular cities, which will give you money. You've got refineries, which are these things here, and I can zoom in to show you them. That's a refinery. That'll give you extra fuel per turn. And of course, there are a bunch of other different kinds of buildings that you can capture as well, like cities. Most normal units can resupply fuel and ammo in cities. No, is it just fuel and... Is it just ammo or is it just fuel and ammo? But you also need, like, supply trucks to be parked next to them to do fueling and repairs, which is, yeah, you need that to happen. You need... brain work with me here. But yeah, if you want to move beyond this move hex range, like if you want to move into the red, it'll cost double the fuel to get there, which means that if you want your units to be there ASAP, you can absolutely rush them. But once they're out, once ground units are out of fuel, I can't move without being resupplied. When air units are out of fuel, if you can land them by putting them at low altitude and then landing them while their fuel is still there, they'll be stuck. If you don't, they'll crash. Yes, this happens a lot. Notably, moving units in this game actually takes a while, especially if you're doing a 1x1. But you can actually use marching orders. And marching orders are very useful because you can map an area out, for example. So if I map this area here, now if I hit the start button, not the start button, sorry, the triangle button, I can order units to move. So as you can see, that plane has moved out partway to its destination. And I've also got some tanks that have marching orders still. But yeah, as you can see, marching orders lets you determine where units are going to go, and you can set them to move every turn, which is very useful. And all the other stuff in your start menu is pretty basic. You've got a soldier list. You have a movement terrain list. You have another movement list. You have a full reference to all the different units in the game, although I don't know why you'd need that. While you're in game, you can actively check all the units you can see. You've got your typical status screen. This will also show your objectives in mission. You've got all your different places on the map. I don't remember entirely what these last three here do, but I haven't felt the need to use them just yet. This resets the camera. Oh yeah, I remember what this third one does too. It takes you back to your HQ. This resupplies everyone who can be resupplied, and this does the marching orders as I showed off earlier. And if you hit start, this is how you end your turn. Notably, compared to Daisenryaku, the World War II one, you do all your production and all your movements and attacks on the same turn, which is actually kind of nice. Save and load, you've got the ability to... Well, I'll explain what that one does very shortly. And this one lets you change your options, so we can actually change how all that works. But you've waited long enough, let's show off some battles. And knowing this game, it'll be a bunch of delightfully cheesy 3D models attacking other delightfully cheesy 3D models. Notably, unlike Daisenryaku, the World War II one, this doesn't actually show you a... I'm gonna sneeze in a second. Excuse me. Unlike Daisenryaku 2, it doesn't actually show you a estimate of how much damage you're gonna do beforehand, which is kind of disappointing. But on this screen here, you can see things like your hit chance. Like, I'm currently at 87% hit chance, and it also tells you how much advantage the enemy unit's gonna have of counterattacks. And trust me, with an 87% hit ratio, this thing will be more than dead before it can do any damage to me. And you've also got firepower, which is the 4 for me and the 3 for them. But if I hit circle here, it'll do a very quick battle. Unfortunately, I wasn't supposed to do that. But yeah, this is how the quick battle works. So, yeah, that shouldn't have happened. It should have shown off an actual 3D fight. I'm not entirely sure why it didn't. Okay, was it that? I just need to get the right setting in order to get this right. Yeah, the right setting in order to get this right. Go my brain. I want to show off at least one of these fights. If I can. No, that just skips all the battle scenes entirely. That's a bit of a problem. I thought I reset all the settings back to default, but I didn't, because the default settings actually let you do the 3D fights all together. Well, actually let you do the full-on 3D fight, so I'm not entirely sure what I've done wrong here. Get the other artillery gun attacking something that's in range. Nope, still on the quick battles. Go me. I really should have tested this before I went into the fight. So, if I've got my logic right, that should be the full-on 3D fights. Do I have a bomb I can still drop on this? I do. So let's drop the bomb on this thing and see if we can get a... Nope, I do not have my logic right. And that plane is just gone, because you can't see what actually happens to it. Okay, so I've got my logic right. It's got to be this, and it's got to be this. Okay, we will attack this cannon here then. Nope, I've still got it wrong. This is going to be an embarrassing jump cut to do, isn't it? There we go. Had the wrong menu option the entire time. Because I'm an idiot. But yeah, this is what the 3D battles look like. The unfortunate thing being they take a fairly long time to load. And, well, let's be honest. They look delightfully shit. Yeah, it's, I mean, they're fun to look at once or twice. And they do remind me a lot of how Advance Wars battles used to work. But at the same time, you're not going to want to watch them more than a couple of times, which is why I had them turned off in the first place. But anyway, you're probably bored of me sitting around talking about how this game works, but I'm hoping that that last half an hour of video footage has shown you what the game is actually like. In terms of like how you actually play it and stuff like that. Now let's do something a little more interesting. The first thing we're going to do is I'm going to turn the simple battles back on. Because, trust me, you're going to want to turn the simple battles back on. Now, I have a way of going about this that some people might not agree with, but let's be honest. I'm absolutely terrible at strategy games. Every time I play one, I end up taking absolute ages to make a move while trying to think about what I want to talk about. And some people don't like this, understandably. So I have an easier way to deal with this. Turns out, in this game, there's actually a way to have all the players be CPUs. And when you do this, the entire game progresses in fast forward. So you can see a bunch of stuff going on. You can watch every single player taking their turn, and you can see a bunch of stuff going on in a very short amount of time. So, better that I do this than, you know, like, waste your time with, like, you know, doing things like just be constantly taking my turn, while the AI can be constantly taking their turns. You also get a little bit of representation of how the Fog of War works. However, I am also going to zoom out to give you a better idea of the entire battlefield while things are going, although you may not be able to see all the individual units that are going at the same time. So I'm gonna, well, I probably shouldn't be holding down the square button, but nevertheless, there we go. So this will hopefully just give you a rough idea of how the game works. I'll zoom back in and have a look at how the units are doing from time to time when the battles really get going. But yeah, this is basically the game being played by 4 players in the fastest possible way. So, let's talk about this game. So, notably, this game is actually a lot simpler, but also a fair bit more complex than the last one I did. So, for example, to say how it's more complex, obviously, there's a little bit of an interception there, and the AH-64 got a free hit in, which didn't do that much damage for them, unfortunately. Considering how much opportunity they had, like 47% accuracy, that's a little bit disappointing for them. But then again, it's probably better to send in a jet with some extra firepower instead, which is, you know, again, a little bit disappointing for them, but whatever. So, yeah, as I was saying, the game is a lot more complex and a lot less complex. So, yeah, this whole Fog of War thing is entirely interesting, especially the mechanic they have for intercepting enemy units, or rather, them being intercepted by you or whoever has decided to move into the enemy zone of control. I actually know what that term means now. But it's interesting because it makes the battlefield a lot more hectic, considering you don't know what's going on outside of your field of view. It's also been simplified by the way that there's only one turn to be made. There's only one phase in every turn, which, as far as I know, doesn't actually happen in the other two games that I've still got to do coverage of on this channel, because it's a little strange. They do the two separate things as well, which is a little odd. Also, I'm going to hide this little panel on the left here because it actually makes the game go by faster, because it doesn't waste your time with capturing. You just hear the sound effect and that's it. But what's left here is actually a really interesting style of game. Oh, look at that. The helicopter's engaging the ground troops. But the ground troops have pretty good anti-air weapons, it looks like. And yeah, Blue's just moving all its units up in a convoy, because if you're on the road, you get to move faster. But yeah, with the Fog of War, it presents an interesting challenge, because you want to be moving up all your units slowly, and you want to be trying to trick the enemy into moving into your units. As far as I can tell, they're affected by Fog of War as well, which is kind of nice. It's also affected by the usual zone of control rules, and I didn't understand what zone of control meant, but thankfully there are some actual guides for this game's predecessor up on the net, and this game actually looks really similar to its predecessor. So the same sort of guides actually do work. The game just has a fair bit of rebalancing done to it. So you end up with zone of control, which is if units are in the same like aerial altitude, so if they're on the ground or if they're in low altitude in the air or medium or high altitude in the air or stuff like that, you won't be able to move your units past them, which means maintaining control of an area might be as simple as just keeping a bunch of SAM sites and a bunch of tanks in a line. But when you've got a huge map like this, where you can be attacked from 3 different corners of the map by 3 different factions, that's where things get even more interesting, because you have to be keeping an eye on all 3 things going on at once, and you potentially might open yourself up to attack from an enemy that will come from behind you. I actually watched a couple of battles go full speed, and, well, full speed as in full speed like this. And it can take a while for these battles, actually. This game is extremely slow-paced, even for your typical Daisenryaku game. And by your typical Daisenryaku game, I mean the one that I've played before. But yeah, it is a very slow game, and I've actually come to appreciate it, because with the amount of units and stuff that you have to move around the battlefield, it really does make you feel like a bona fide military general, I gotta say. I'll just zoom back out while I've got absolutely nothing to show, more or less. I could turn off the battles showing up entirely if I wanted to, and in fact, I just might do that. Also, I'm going to turn off the music that's going in the background, because as you can hear, it's probably been driving you nuts, but this is the only track there is for battles, and it loops constantly, so we do not want to do that. But let's turn off battles entirely. If I remember which of these options actually turns off the battles entirely, we can just watch the Battle for Territory go out over here with no music in the background whatsoever. Which might be a bad thing to some people, but trust me, you want to get rid of the music in this game ASAP, and you want to be listening to your own music as you do. You can see where conflict is taking place because of the red hexes. But yeah, these maps can be absolutely huge, and you've got access to things like ships and submarines and lots of different kinds of aircraft. So there's all sorts of different combat going around the map at any one time, and while this would be a much more of a pain in the ass without the marching order system, thankfully the marching order system does make things more capable of being dealt with. And of course, you've got the ability to resupply every unit that can be resupplied, because it's not like the World War II one where you're asked to resupply every unit that's in range of a resupply truck, which is an interesting compromise, but nevertheless, it is still a thing that can occur. The maps themselves can be quite huge as well. I mean, this map is pretty damn big, And they're only just now really starting to get into the thick of it with each other, the 4 different factions on the 4 different corners. But nevertheless, it still turns out to be a really slow game even on the smaller maps, because the smaller maps can still take a while, and the enemy AI, while not being incredibly difficult, I mean, there's still partway a challenge, but they're not going to be too hard to deal with in the long run. Especially once you start to get used to the game. Like, I have trouble dealing with them, but they do tend to do stupid things from time to time. Like, I played a mission where they were loading units onto boats constantly for some reason. And I was just there bombing the shit out of their boats and killing them before they had any chance to react. Like, they were trying to stop my ships, but I had sailed like 5 destroyers into their port. And it cost me a lot of money. It was a really risky strategy, but it worked out because I took out all their ground units. And I was just moving up cheap ground units along the mainland to get them while I was working on their boats. And that actually worked out really well for me. But the game's also got this interesting dynamic that Advanced Wars also has, where the more structures you have, the more money and fuel you have. And you do need to keep an eye on both. I mean, fuel actually comes pretty easily, but it's the money that really needs to be dealt with, especially with America. America is the most expensive unit type. Hey, look, interception attack. America is the most expensive unit type. So if you're ever playing as America, they're also the strongest unit type by far. So, you know, if you want an easy victory on anything, you probably want to play as America. But all the other units are actually pretty well balanced, except they're cheaper as well. So, yeah, if you're playing as America, watch your money. If you're playing as anyone else, watch your fuel. And considering how many different, like, buildings, structures, and refineries and stuff there is to capture on the maps by default, it creates an interesting game of territorial war where you have to be constantly trying to capture and just keep hold of all your stuff, because the enemy is not afraid to send single BMPs down and capture all your stuff while your main force is out occupying everything. So you want to be keeping stuff that can keep an eye on your buildings in the background as well. And there's a maximum unit limit of 50 units. I think you have the ability to raise this to more, but I can't be 100% sure on that. And 50 units on a map like this is, like, stretching it a bit. Imagine it on a map where the entirety of the map is taken up by, like, land hexes. Keeping your unit count in check on a map like that is insane. And, of course, every individual unit has to be backed up with a supply truck that can refuel it and resupply it. And to refill your unit's HP, you have to park them in a freaking airport. So you need like a freaking you need to, well, I mean, air units have to be refueled at an airport. So you need to be keeping airports as close to the enemy as possible. And you need to have a lot of buildings that you can send all your ground units into, because they can refuel, resupply, and repair themselves while they're there. And there are units you can carry along that can do repairs, and there are obviously supply trucks that you can take along that can obviously, brain work with me here, that can refuel, repair, and resupply. But again, they need to be refueled, repaired, and resupplied as well. So once they're out of everything, you might as well just leave them to die. But yeah, considering how many different kinds of units there are as well, you can have long-range missiles, you can have anti-air sights, you can have artillery guns, you can have, obviously, your main ground forces, you can have infantry moving up that can't do much damage to main ground forces, but there are units that actually have stealth capabilities, which is even more interesting, because even if you're inside the enemy's, like, fog of war, depending on how high the stealth capability is, you might be able to move a unit up and down the coast without it even being noticed, which is definitely an interesting way of playing things. It's actually quite hard to take a hold of, but once you've got a unit that's really good in stealth, it can move up and down the map without being seen, which would require a fair few enemy kills, but at the same time, it's actually quite a difficult thing to pull off. But once you've pulled it off by upgrading a unit, then things will definitely start to be more interesting in your fights. And again, you've got the ability to, like, level up units, which is even more interesting, because you can take your units back and forth between different campaign missions and you can just, and different free play missions, and you can build the ultimate army. Unfortunately, it does cost more to deploy later on, but, and it would take a very long time to build up an army, but it's still a really interesting just system to work with, and if I was able to get this game digitally, it would be on my Vita for quite a long time, I would imagine. Especially considering how small it must be, since all the 3D models are pretty shit. It's a very interesting game, much like the previous one. It's interesting in different ways. Like, you do actually have an advantage if you know your Chinooks from your Ospreys, for example. So you can tell what units are just by looking at them, what their main functionality is, what they can do, and having your different packs on your different air units and your different tanks and stuff, for example, makes things interesting, because if you can get your unit to an airport or a town or something, you can resupply it with a different weapon pack, and you can have it be a different unit altogether, more or less. So you can have a jet be an entirely anti-aircraft jet, or you can make it be a bomber, or you can bring out a dedicated bomber, but you have to protect it with air support. You can have an entire navy going along, because I think that, was it the Japanese navy that's second to none? There is a navy that is second to none that is in America, because America is entirely it has an amazing capability, which is kind of funny when you think about it, because this is a Japanese game. It's not even World War II. It's more or less modern day. So to have the Japanese developers make America the best faction is certainly something else. Again, just the one thing that I miss is just multiplayer, whether it be local pass and play or ad hoc or just online multiplayer of any kind. It just seems to be missing, which is kind of disappointing, honestly. Like, I'm not entirely sure what they're doing, making the portable version the only version you can't play portably. Because imagine being able to play this with your workmates or something, like just in between doing some sort of job. You just pop in for a few turns of Daisenryaku and you just have to full-on battle carrying on. But yeah, it is just kind of disappointing that there's no multiplayer to be seen on this version at the very least. So we might as well talk about presentation, technical stuff, and stuff like that. So let me just pick the Vita back up. I actually had it sitting down while I was talking about that, because it is a lot easier to talk about games when you're not playing them and you're just watching them being carried out on a screen, I gotta say. But yeah, if we zoom in, we can see that the game is... How do I put this? It's actually, like, this whole board game thing going on here is actually kind of nicely detailed. I love this sort of board game aesthetic, where there's a bunch of different hexes with a bunch of different kinds of terrain. And again, all the different terrain depends on how far you can... changes how far you can see and how far you can move and stuff like that. And it's all very interesting. And the board game aesthetic has got going for it. It reminds me of that old game that I never actually got to play, but it was like the shit back at the time, which was Hero Quest. It reminds me of that. Just having all the different hexes be a thing is just, yeah, it reminds me of that. And just this whole 3D board game thing is actually kind of nice to look at. And there are a couple of nice little details here and there, like all the trees are different on the hexes. Like, they're obviously a bunch of different repeating patterns, but at the same time, it's just kind of nice to look at this forest and actually feel like it's a forest that this blue guy is traveling through. It is still quite interesting. However, the visual performance can really take a dive at times, especially when you're zoomed out like this. When you've got every unit on screen. Well, actually, it's not doing too badly now, but when you've got like 200-something units on screen at once, on the biggest maps imaginable, the performance can drop down into single digits without even trying, honestly. And it's a shame that the 3D battles don't look at least slightly better. I mean, it just looks like the 3D models taken from the board game side of things just stuck into a thing where they shoot at each other. I mean, on the original Daisenryaku games, like there's a PC game called Daisenryaku Perfect, they had 2D, like, unit attack sprites, and they had them back on things like the Genesis as well. Like, yes, this series stretches from the NES all the way to the modern day, and it's been on almost every platform in between. So, those 2D sprites, like if they had kept them around, that would have been way more interesting. I'm not entirely sure why they dumped that for 3D hexagonal stuff. I'm not entirely sure what prompted the change, but there you go. I'm almost half tempted to pick up a Japanese copy of Daisenryaku Perfect, but I have no idea where to find them. Like, I went on Yahoo Auctions Japan, which is like their eBay, and I only found one copy of it for 4k yen, but I don't know how to get it shipped here, which is not great. But, oh well. The sound effects can get a little bit repetitive, but, I mean, it does what you expect them to do, so it doesn't really get too out of hand. It doesn't sound too ridiculous or out of place, so it's not like I have too much against it. What I do have a bit against is the freaking music, which just, I mean, I know I've turned it off now, but trust me, it's the same looping track over and over again in the battles, which doesn't make any sense, because the main menu theme actually sounded pretty great, so I don't understand what it is about this here that just doesn't work. It's really strange. I can't explain it. We've got combat going on up here with the... Is that the... What force is that? Is that the yellow force? Yeah, kind of hard to tell, because when they're submerged inside buildings, the buildings have to be made semi-transparent, but they don't make them, like... They don't make them fully transparent, so the color's still there, and it can be kind of confusing at times. I mean, blue on red and red on blue is fine, but when you get, like, green and red, it just turns it into an odd brown, which is a little strange, but not the biggest deal in the world. As you can see, very useful to have both a blocking physical force with this one tank here, and then you have a full bunch of artillery guns in the background, because when that happens, you have both zone of control, which prevents units from moving forward, and you also have a way to attack them from the back lines, which is actually very useful, because you need a way to do that in this game. Because if you don't, you'll either get swarmed, or you'll just get beaten down into a bloody pulp, which is very, very bad. I could let this battle play out to its conclusion, but we've been here for 20 minutes already, and like, they've barely still moved out beyond their own quadrants. The AI, as I said, they are quite slow to get things done. If you're a very heavy attacker with, like, the American side, it's fairly easy to win. But when you've got, like, cheapo, crapo units like the Chinese or the Germans, and no, I'm not saying that as a slant on the Chinese or the Germans. They have the cheapest units, but they also have the shittiest units. Because it balances out, obviously. So you can swarm someone with 50-something tanks if you want, but again, unit limit. See, that guy just leveled up there. Can I actually, like, no, I don't think I can. But yeah, since he leveled up, he gets more powerful abilities and stuff like that. It's quite nice. What the hell is that thing? That thing's huge. It looks like an armored personnel carrier, but it outweighs the size of a fucking tank. That's kind of silly when you think about it, but then again, the board game aesthetic still kind of works for it. It's charming, really. You can also do things like aerial troop insertions. You can bomb buildings so that they're completely useless. You can do all sorts of stuff like that. It's kind of neat. So there's a lot of different things to strategy. I like it. I really do. Oh god, excuse me. I don't know where that burp came from. This is a really interesting game. I really do like Daisenryaku Exceed 2, and it's probably the most beginner friendly I've played so far out of the two. Then again, Daisenryaku Perfect or Gendai Daisenryaku 2016 might be more beginner friendly, but considering the ability to go and look at this game's predecessor's English translation for information on how the game works, and just being able to translate some of the interface stuff, not all of it, because obviously you're not going to be able to translate the English and the Japanese abilities unless the units are exactly the same, which is fairly unlikely. Considering that all that stuff exists, this might be the best game to start out with, considering that, you know, you've got all the English stuff available, and I just spent half an hour explaining to you the very basics of how the game works and how all the units work and stuff like that. and you've also spent half an hour just watching how everything works in, like, fast forward motion with 0 battles, which is kind of silly when you think about it. I'm probably just gonna leave it and let you see the rest of the battle. I might actually have to speed it up even further in comparison. Like, I might have to up the video speed after I stop talking to something like 300%, because this battle's gonna go on for like an hour if I don't. And then again, I might just stop now because I do not have the hard drive space. I just don't. I mean, a typical Vita game recording, like for 30 to 40 minutes, is like 200 gig. This is 56 minutes in, no sign of stopping. We're probably at 300 gig already. So, yeah, I do not have that much hard drive space to work with, unfortunately. So, can I actually, like, unfortunately, it's very hard to get to the pause menu while there's an action going on. Can I actually swap? I can. I can actually become player 1 at this point. Or I can actually become this actual, player. Yep, I am actually the yellow player now. It is kind of neat. But then I can just swap it right back to being... You can actually make one of the computer players hard and the rest of them easy. And the hard player can just, like, steamroll over the other players. It's kind of silly. But yeah, it's, I don't think I'm going to continue, like, laying this video play out, but you've seen a relatively good example of what combat in the... And you've seen a relatively good example of what this game is like. So, it is a really interesting strategy game, and it's fairly beginner-friendly. I mean, I've given you all the information you need to get started, so figuring the rest out shouldn't be too hard, just through trial and error, playing through all the tutorials, having a translation guide at hand, you know, stuff like that. But yeah, I really do like Daisenryaku Exceed 2, and depending on how the other two games are, this is currently my pick for game of the series that I'll come back to. Again, I just wish there was multiplayer. I'm pretty sure the console versions actually have pass and play multiplayer, because these games come out on PS3. I think the only one that's come out on PS4 is actually the one I checked out last time, which is the World War II one. But yeah, at first you had my interest, Daisenryaku, with the World War II one, but now you have my attention with Daisenryaku Exceed 2. And of course you can save and load pretty much anytime you want, so if you feel like save scumming, well, there you go. Unfortunately, turning off the music turns off the awesome menu music as well, which sucks, but there you go. So yeah, Daisenryaku Exceed 2 is an import. I would recommend it. Like, let's just go off the assumption that I've checked out the other two games in advance, and this one still stands above the other two as the most beginner-friendly Daisenryaku game there is. I would recommend it. Like, well, I'd full-on recommend it as a strategy game. Like, we don't have very many strategy games, and the ones we do have aren't very good. Most of the good ones we have are actually on PSP. So having something like this exist is actually pretty damn awesome. And considering how it's fairly easy to pick up when you know what you're doing as a non-Japanese speaker, well, you know, you'll be fine. So yeah, I'm going to end this video off before it gets to an hour and you can't watch it on Vita. So this has been Blue Maxima, and I'll see you all next time.